It's time to go to our regular political panel as we do on a Tuesday. First, the ACT Liberal Senator, Assistant Minister for Finance, Charities and Electoral Matters, and Lord Voldemort himself, Zed Seselja. G'day, Zed.
Good morning, Stephen. How are you?
Oh, mate, well, I'm afraid of you now.
Yes, well, mate, I'll get on with my job, which is making sure we have a strong budget tonight, making sure we continue to grow our economy and deliver some great stuff for Canberra, as we saw yesterday with our $155 million infrastructure package. So, yeah, very, very pleased to be delivering those things.
And with the alternate view, the member for Bean, David Smith. G'day, David.
G'day, Stephen. Look, I always thought it was Peter Dutton who was compared to Voldemort. Definitely not Zed.
Look how much hair I've got, David.
Exactly. You've got much more impressive hair than me.
I actually don't know who Lord Voldemort is, other than I think he's from Harry Potter. Is that right?
Yes, correct.
Right, okay. Moving right along, budget tonight. Look, it's going to be a big spending budget, and some people are saying a very illiberal budget, Zed, but I think in these unprecedented times, and that's a word that's going to get thrown around a lot, the kind of budget we would have expected both sides to throw up.
Well, it is a very important budget, and obviously the focus is on jobs, economic recovery, getting people back into work, putting more money into people's pockets, building the infrastructure we need. So those are the really important things. We saw our announcement yesterday, as I say, here in Canberra, some really important infrastructure priorities. We're seeing those around the country, but also I think we've always been about lower taxes. We want to put more money into the pockets of hardworking Australians. It will be about jobs, yes. There will be a very large deficit. We all know why there's a very large deficit. It's because of the massive hit to our economy from this health crisis, one that we've weathered better than most, but that doesn't mean there aren't massive challenges. And my priority, the government's priority, is all about getting people back into the workforce, having a sustainable economy and growing our way out of this very, very challenging crisis.
David, I know we're supposed to wait until 7:30 tonight, but let's face it, for the last 30 years, everything that's ever been in a budget has been leaked well before the day. Is there enough in this for the ACT, in your view?
Well, it's interesting, Stephen. Whilst often we get the announcements, it's often necessary to see the detail, to work out exactly how they'll play out. And I think it is actually welcome that there's some infrastructure spending coming for the ACT. But look, it's worth noting, though, that some of that's still a fair time off. I think anyone who would have seen the rain or felt the rain this morning knows that the bridge over the Molonglo is an important commitment. So that's quite welcome. But we know that it's not shovel ready. We're probably still 12 months, 18 months away. But look, there are other elements, as I said, that we're pretty keen to see what the detail is, because we want to make sure that they actually hit the mark. So we'll be listening pretty closely today.
I want to ask both of you.
Sorry, I just wanted to respond because, David's right in a sense that obviously things like the bridge in Molonglo, obviously we work with the ACT government and that won't happen immediately, but there are priorities that are happening right now. So, for instance, for the Narrow Highway money, that work is happening right now. We've upgraded that from a $100 million commitment to $115 million. The Parkway money, which I'm really proud of, which the Canberra Liberals matched yesterday, which would mean $100 million if they came in, will be really, really important to, I think, eventually widening it. So, yes, some things don't start straight away. Some things are already happening, and it's part of an overall $1 billion investments announced in Canberra just in the last couple of years.
I want to touch on that.
Look, Stephen, just quickly on those other announcements. I think the Chief Minister said that they're still waiting some detail on that additional spending. So, look, I think on the face of it seems welcome, but I think we just sort of want to see some more detail.
I want to talk from and I'm hoping I can get a bipartisan response on this. And regardless of what flavour of federal government is, you can throw money at infrastructure projects all you like, but the federal government doesn't build anything. It's always state governments that do that. When are we going to get state and territory governments to get rid of all the red and green tape that stands in the way of these projects actually going ahead properly? David, I'll start with you.
Well, I think, Stephen, actually what you'll find is it's actually industry that delivers most of those projects, and I think we need to be careful about what projects are we talking about in terms of red tape and green tape. Look, Stephen, I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but there was a pretty interesting report just lobbed just earlier this week from Professionals Australia, the engineering and science organisation, and one of the findings that they've made is that we don't actually have enough expertise in terms of engineering across government, and that's at both a federal and a territory and state level, that actually informs a lot of this decision making.
Zed?
Well, look, I mean, I think it's a reasonable point you make, Stephen, that that there are sometimes that it is state and territories along with industry who are often delivering, and we're keen to work with them as partners. I mean, the most famous example of a government blocking a major infrastructure project was the Victorian government with the East-West Link, where there was billions on the table, and instead they cancelled that. So we're also undertaking a process where we want to make some of these environmental approvals more streamlined, and there's some legislation around that to make sure that we don't have this double up between state and territory approvals and Commonwealth approvals. That's a really important reform, and cutting red tape and green tape you're absolutely right, is absolutely critical to our economy, not just for the infrastructure projects that government's announced, but for all of those businesses getting on and doing major projects.
David, I want to touch on you. The budgets, particularly what it's going to mean for the public service. Professionals Australia, the union that represents engineers, scientists and IT professionals, which is kind of follows on from the point you make, wants government to remove its cap on public servant numbers. At some point, we've got to say, government's just getting way too big, don't we?
Well, it's certainly not getting too big at the moment, Stephen, and what we've actually seen instead is an explosion in contractors, consultants and labour hire providers. Now, the reality is you need a balance of all those elements, and look, what Professionals Australia is saying, and this is coming from their membership, so we're talking about engineers and scientists who are grounded in evidence, is that if you want to actually oversight many of the contracts for other work, and whether it be infrastructure, whether it be material development, then you actually need that expertise within government. And unfortunately, what they've observed right across the ground is effectively artificial staffing limits not making that possible.
Zed, what do you think about that? Because I mean, that is a fair comment that we are seeing the growth in consultants and I guess part-time public servants, for lack of a better way of putting it. Are we better off having full-time professionals, or are we just shifting the buck?
Well, we need a good mix of both. I saw some figures out just, I think, in the last day or so that showed, obviously, during this crisis that there were many thousands of jobs. That many of them were contractors because they were responding, I guess, to the need in the ATO and the need in Services Australia to be getting money out the door, to be helping businesses with getting their taxes. So there always needs to be a mix. I mean, you wouldn't necessarily have wanted all of those people to have been full-time permanent employees if the task is going to be a temporary one. We hope that these crisis levels, of course, won't last. But I've always been a believer that, someone who does a job as a contractor for the public service or someone who is a full-time, long-term employee, both of them provide a very valuable service to Australia. And when it comes to the ACT economy, both of them are getting a wage, which they then are able to look after their family and spend here in Canberra. So I don't think it's one or the other, and I think having that flexibility has been useful.
Dave, I just want to point out one thing. We're not always fighting amongst politicians. You've want to highlight the launch of the bipartisan Parliamentary Friends of Pain Management group that's taking place in Yarralumla today.
Yeah, look, thanks, Steve. And I should note the co-convener of that group, Senator Wendy Askew from Tasmania, who has a long sort of interest in this area. And look, over 3 million Australians live with chronic pain, and that's something that has been a particular challenge across this year with some of the challenges of the coronavirus. And so, look, one of the great things is we've got great support from the Governor-General and the Governor-General's wife, and it's an opportunity to get a lot of experts, practitioners, but also people who are dealing with that daily struggle together to see how we can improve their lives.
Zed, thank you for your time this morning, or Lord Voldemort, I should say. David, we'll catch up again next week.
Thanks very much, guys.
That's Zed Seselja and David Smith. Back